They laughed the first time they saw him, old man, with a mop, hunched back, thick gray mustache, pushing a yellow cart down the hall of Fairview High School. They called him Captain Mop, Mr. Clean's grandpa, and sometimes just made exaggerated military salutes as he walked by. "Yo, squad attention," shouted Kyle Thomas, the class clown of 11B, slamming his sneakers together mockingly and giving a clumsy salute. "Sergeant Scrubs coming through." The hallway burst into laughter. Mr. Harrison, the janitor, didn't flinch. He didn't slow down. He didn't smile. He kept pushing the cart, eyes fixed forward like he hadn't heard them at all. But he had. Every word. Behind the glasses, behind the deep lines of age and wear, something flickered. But no one noticed. "Why's he always so serious?" Maya Martinez whispered as they passed him in the cafeteria. "Like, bro, it's not D-Day. You're just cleaning trays." That day, they went too far. Kyle crept up behind the janitor during lunch and dropped a ketchup packet near his feet, then stomped it. Red splattered over Mr. Harrison's shoes. "Oops," Kyle laughed. "Looks like the battlefield's got blood again, Captain." More laughter. Mr. Harrison looked down, slowly, eyes narrowing. He didn't speak. He walked off to the supply closet. "Dude's weird." Kyle shrugged. "Bet he's just mad he didn't amount to anything in life." But 2 tables away, Principal Reynolds had been watching. She didn't say anything either, just quietly clenched her jaw and tapped a finger on the table. The next morning, an announcement crackled over the intercom. "All students are to report to the auditorium at 10 a.m. for a mandatory assembly. Attendance will be taken." The students groaned. Another anti-bullying lecture. Another future is yours speech. They slouched into the red velvet chairs, whispering, snickering. The lights dimmed. Then, unexpectedly, Principal Reynolds stepped onto the stage. She didn't smile. "This school talks a lot about respect," she began, her voice cold. "But some of you clearly don't understand what that means." Uneasy shifting, Kyle smirked. "Let me introduce someone to you. Not Mr. Harrison, the janitor, but Master Gunnery Sergeant Benjamin R. Harrison, U.S. Marine Corps, retired." There was a pause. A curtain lifted, and there he was, standing straight, tall, broad-shouldered in a perfectly fitted dress blue uniform. Medals gleamed from his chest. Rows of ribbons. His white gloves rested on his belt. His hat was perched with surgical precision. He looked like a statue carved from steel. Silence dropped like a bomb. Master Gunnery Sergeant Harrison served 32 years in the United States Marine Corps. Reynolds continued. He led units in Desert Storm, Afghanistan, and Iraq. He trained hundreds of Marines, and he's one of the most decorated drill instructors in modern military history. Kyle's jaw hung open. Maya blinked hard. Mr. Harrison, Sergeant Harrison, stepped forward. He didn't need a microphone. "When I walk down your halls," he began, voice deep and commanding, "I hear the whispers. I hear the jokes, the mocking. You think because I wear coveralls instead of a uniform, I'm someone to be pitied. You think pushing a mop means I failed." He paused. "I've seen boys cry for their mothers with bullets in their legs. I've pulled men from burning vehicles and watched others die because I couldn't get to them in time. I've been awake for 72 hours straight, leading missions in enemy territory. So let me be real clear with you all." He walked slowly to the edge of the stage, eyes locking with each student like a laser. "If I wanted respect, I would have worn this uniform from day one. But I didn't, because respect doesn't come from a uniform. It comes from character. And if you need a medal to be kind, you've already lost." A single cough broke the silence. "Some of you think cleaning floors is beneath you," he continued. "But I've cleaned blood off these hands. I've cleaned broken dreams off the pavement. Mopping a cafeteria isn't the hardest thing I've done. Watching friends die, that was harder." He turned toward Kyle directly. "You think I'm angry. I'm not. I just remember a time when young men learned discipline, not disrespect. When they learned how to stand tall, not by stepping on others." Kyle sank into his chair, red-faced. Then Harrison's tone softened. "I came here not because I had to, but because I wanted to. because I saw a school losing its backbone. I wanted to help even if it meant pushing a mop. And I did it quietly, because sometimes the loudest work is done in silence. A few students looked down in shame. Others blinked back tears. He took off his white gloves and set them on the podium. Before you judge the next janitor, the next old man, ask yourself this: what battles did they fight so you could sit comfortably and laugh? Then he stepped back. No applause, no need. The assembly ended. The next day, the halls were different. Kyle didn't joke anymore. He walked up to Mr. Harrison near the lockers. I'm sorry, sir," he muttered, eyes down. Mr. Harrison looked at him for a long moment. Then, with a firm nod, said, "Then be better." That's all I ever asked of any recruit. From then on, kids held doors open for him. They greeted him with real salutes. They listened. One by one, he became a legend. Not just because of who he was, but because of what he taught them about humility, about valor, and about never judging a man by his coveralls. But the story didn't end there. One spring afternoon, as graduation neared, Maya approached him during lunch. "Mr. Harrison," the first mean. "Sergeant, sorry," she corrected. Awkward. "I just wanted to say thank you. You made me think about my dad." He raised a brow. "Your dad? He was in the Navy. I never really appreciated what he did. But hearing you speak, I called him that night. We talked for hours." Something in Harrison's eyes softened. "That means more to me than you know," he said. From then on, he wasn't just the janitor. He was a mentor. He helped with discipline issues. He gave talks to seniors about leadership. He worked with troubled kids who needed direction. Principal Reynolds brought him into staff meetings. "He sees more in one day than most teachers do in a week," she said. And Kyle enlisted in the Marines a year later. On the day he left, he found Mr. Harrison by the flagpole. "Guess I'm going to find out what boot camp really means." Kyle joked nervously. Harrison studied him. "You'll be fine. Just remember, it's not about being the toughest guy. It's about being the one others can count on." Kyle nodded. "I won't let you down. You already haven't," Harrison replied. Years passed. Then, one Veterans Day, the school held a ceremony. Harrison was invited on stage again. This time, the room erupted in a standing ovation. But when the microphone was passed to him, he didn't speak about war or medals. He pointed to the students. "You're the future. If I leave you with anything, it's this: respect isn't taught, it's lived. And sometimes the loudest leaders are the ones sweeping the floor." No one laughed again. And every time he pushed that mop, it wasn't just cleaning. It was a quiet reminder that greatness wears many uniforms, and some of the strongest heroes are the ones who walk among us, unseen, until we finally look. After the Veterans Day ceremony, things didn't just change for Mr. Harrison. They changed for the entire culture of Fairview High. His name began circulating in whispered tones of reverence, not ridicule. It wasn't just the janitor anymore, it was the sergeant, and every kid in those halls knew exactly what that meant. Still, Mr. Harrison remained humble. He arrived every morning before sunrise, polished the floors with the same discipline he once used to polish boots before inspection, and took quiet pride in the order he kept. But he noticed something. Students had begun joining him. "Hey, Mr. Harrison," said Luis, a sophomore who used to skip class. "You mind if I help you out for a bit? Coach says I need to start giving back." Mr. Harrison raised an eyebrow. "You ever used a buffer?" "No, sir." "Then let's start with a broom." Discipline begins at the basics. Luis swept every morning for the next 3 months. Then came the fight. It happened in the cafeteria on a Thursday. A junior named Marcus, usually quiet, was being cornered by a group of seniors. One shoved him. Another snatched his tray. When Marcus tried to grab it back, someone pushed him hard, and he fell into a table. Harrison was at the other end of the room when he saw it. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He just moved fast, straight, purposeful. "Hey," one senior barked. "Back off, old man." But when Harrison stepped between them, the air shifted. His eyes locked onto the ringleader, a kid named Sean, football star. Used to getting away with things. I've faced down Taliban fighters with RPGs, Harrison said calmly. You think a kid with a bad attitude scares me? Sean blinked. Marcus stood slowly. Blood was running from his nose. He looked stunned but not afraid anymore. Pick up that tray, Harrison ordered. Sean hesitated. Now. Sean picked it up. Harrison turned to Marcus. You all right, son? Marcus nodded, trying not to cry. Then Harrison did something no one expected. He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Sometimes, he said, loud enough for the cafeteria to hear. Standing your ground doesn't mean throwing a punch. It means not backing down when you know you're worth something. Later that day, Sean was benched for the rest of the season. Coach said it was for disciplinary reasons, but everyone knew. A few days later, Marcus came up to Harrison in the hallway. I didn't get a chance to say thanks. You don't need to. I do, Marcus insisted. Everyone's always picking on me. No one ever stands up. Until you. Harrison looked at him long and hard. You need to remember that moment, he said. Because one day, someone weaker than you will need you to be the one who stands up. From that day on, Marcus started tutoring younger students. He joined the peer mentorship group. Harrison noticed it all but never said a word. Then came senior year. Maya was valedictorian. She had earned scholarships to 2 Ivy League schools. But when it came time to write her speech, she sat frozen for days. Finally, she marched into the custodial office. Mr. Harrison. He looked up from a pile of old mop handles. I need your help, she said. I don't know what to say in my speech. Say the truth. She hesitated. What if people don't like it? Harrison leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. Then you'll know they weren't listening. She smiled. Can I read you the draft when I'm done? You better. At graduation. She stood tall at the podium, gold sash glinting under the gymnasium lights. There was a time, she began, voice strong, when I thought leadership meant being loud. That power came from titles and being voted most popular. But someone changed that for me. She glanced at Harrison sitting in the back row, arms crossed, silent as ever. Leadership, I learned, can come in silence, in quiet strength, in wiping the mud off someone else's boots without needing a thank you. One man changed the way I and many others saw this school, not with speeches, but with action. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Maya gestured. Mr. Harrison, please stand. He didn't want to, but she waited. The room erupted into applause. Teachers, parents, students, even Coach stood clapping. Harrison rose slowly. For once, a small smile cracked through his usually stoic face. After the ceremony, dozens lined up to shake his hand. Then came Kyle, now in uniform himself, fresh from boot camp, hair buzzed, spine straight. Sir, he said, snapping into a crisp salute. Harrison returned it without hesitation. You look like hell, he said. Kyle laughed. I feel worse. You'll get used to it. They both chuckled. Then Kyle sobered. I used to think you were just some old man. Now I know better. You'll meet a lot of old men, Kyle, Harrison said. Some will be heroes, some won't. The important thing is to look with your eyes open. That summer, Kyle rode to the school from deployment. Principal Reynolds read his letter over the intercom. He says, she read, that everything he learned about honor, about discipline, and about real leadership he learned from our janitor. Years passed. Mr. Harrison aged. His steps slowed. But he still came in every day. The district offered him a full-time teaching position in ROTC. He refused. I'm not here to teach war, he said. I'm here to teach respect. More students began asking for his stories. Some of them cried, some changed careers. One girl, inspired by his tale of pulling wounded Marines from wreckage, became a trauma surgeon. Then came the day Harrison didn't show up. It was a Monday. By noon, whispers had turned to worry. By afternoon, Principal Reynolds had made a few calls. By evening, the news spread Harrison had passed in his sleep, peacefully, alone. The next morning, Fairview High was silent. A flag was lowered to half-mast. Then someone taped a photo to his closet door, Harrison in full uniform. metal shining. Underneath, written in Sharpie, you taught us how to walk like giants. Even when we were still learning to crawl. Days later, the entire school gathered in the auditorium. The same stage he once stood on. A chair stood in the center, draped with the American flag. On the screen behind it, a slideshow rolled images of Harrison mopping floors, speaking to students, saluting in uniform. Maya, now a graduate student, returned to speak. When a man spends his life cleaning, it's easy to overlook him. But the truth is, Mr. Harrison didn't just clean our school. He cleaned our minds. He cleaned our hearts. He scrubbed away arrogance, wiped down entitlement, and made room for honor. She paused, swallowing emotion. He used to say, respect isn't taught, it's lived. I finally understand what he meant. They renamed the gymnasium in his honor, the Sergeant B.R. Harrison Hall of Character. And every year on Veterans Day, students read aloud his story. Not just about wars fought abroad, but the quiet wars fought in high school hallways, against cruelty, against ignorance, against ego. Because of him, the school never saw janitors the same way again. And every time a student dropped a tray, someone would whisper, "Pick it up, sergeant's watching." They never laughed again, but they never forgot either. And somewhere, maybe on a higher field of duty, Master Gunnery Sergeant Benjamin R. Harrison still stands tall, back straight, eyes sharp, watching not for enemy fire, but for the next young soul who needs someone to believe in them before they believe in themselves. And in the halls of Fairview High, beneath his portrait, a plaque reads, "Respect doesn't come with a title. It comes with how you carry yourself when no one is watching." The legacy lived on. Years passed, but the stories never faded. Every incoming freshman at Fairview High was told about Mr. Harrison on day one. Not from a textbook, not in some dry morning announcement, but through the voices of upperclassmen who had once laughed and then learned. It became tradition. The ROTC class, which had once struggled for enrollment, grew year after year. A new instructor had been brought in, a former Marine named Sergeant Coleman, but even he began his first day with a tribute. "I'm not here to replace Mr. Harrison," he said firmly to his first group of wide-eyed students. "You don't replace legends. You just try to honor them." And he did. Every drill started with a quote from Harrison's old journal, which had been discovered by Principal Reynolds while helping clear out his things. In it, Harrison had quietly recorded reflections about the students, about the struggle to stay invisible, and about how pain could be a better teacher than pride. One entry read, "Today a boy called me a nobody. That same boy held the door for me. A week later, respect isn't instant. It's earned through consistency, silence, and patience." The journal was laminated and kept in the school library. Kyle, now a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps, returned every year on the anniversary of Harrison's passing. He stood by the flagpole alone, hat in hand, and saluted in silence at 07:00 sharp. No crowd, no fanfare, but someone always noticed. One year, a freshman named David walked up to him. "Sir," he asked shyly, "were you his student?" Kyle nodded. "We all were, whether we knew it or not." "You think he'd be proud of us?" the boy asked. Kyle looked out across the campus. The building had been repainted, the floors polished. Every trash can was spotless. The student body now included kids who volunteered on weekends, cleaned after school dances, and tutored each other like family. He nodded. "I think he already is." David squinted. "What did he teach you, exactly?" Kyle smiled. "That your rank means nothing if your heart is empty, and that the strongest man in the room doesn't need to say a word." David went on to become school president 2 years later. Maya, after finishing graduate school, returned to Fairview High as a guidance counselor. On her desk sat a photo of Harrison, not in uniform but in coveralls, mop in hand, eyes forward, back straight. She kept a quote framed beside it, "Led from behind, so others can find their way ahead." One day, a girl named Janelle came to her office crying. She was being bullied for wearing secondhand clothes, for not having a phone, for being quiet. Maya handed her a tissue and nodded toward the photo. You see that man? The girl nodded. He was once laughed at by this school, called names, mistreated. But he didn't fight back with hate. He changed this place with his silence, his dignity, and his kindness. You have that in you too. Janelle wiped her eyes. Really? Absolutely, Maya said. Sometimes the ones who get laughed at are the ones who rise the highest. Janelle joined student council the next year, then the honor society, then became valedictorian herself. When she gave her speech, she didn't talk about her grades. She talked about the janitor she never met, but who had changed the lives of everyone who came before her. She ended it simply. Some legacies are written in ink, others are written on tile floors, cleaned every morning before the world wakes up. The gym, the sergeant, BR. Harrison Hall became a sacred place, not just for sports, but for quiet reflection. Seniors would leave notes there, letters, confessions, gratitude. They called it the Wall of Honor. No one defaced it. No one dared. Years later, when the district tried to tear down and rebuild the school, there was resistance, not from the teachers, from the students. Hundreds of them, current and alumni, wrote letters, made calls, stood outside the school with signs. You don't erase a man's footprints by pouring concrete over them. In the end, the gym was preserved, modernized. Yes, but the plaque remained untouched. So did the photo. And every student, athlete or not, touched it before big games for luck. They believed in him like others believed in saints. And maybe, in a way, he was one, because in a world obsessed with power and position, he had chosen humility. In a building filled with noise, he had chosen silence. And in a place where laughter once mocked him, his memory had become untouchable. Sometimes, late at night, the new janitor, Mr. Ellis, a quiet man with kind eyes, would mop the cafeteria floors and swear he could feel someone watching over him, not in a creepy way, in a peaceful way, as if the man who had once stood where he stood was still there, nodding in approval. One night, as Ellis cleaned, a little girl from the aftercare program wandered in. Mister, she said, tugging his sleeve, are you the war hero? Ellis smiled. No, sweetie, that was Mr. Harrison. Where is he now? Ellis looked up at the stars outside the window. Everywhere, he whispered, especially here. And he placed a hand over his heart. Back in the main office, Principal Reynolds, now in her final year before retirement, added one last line to Harrison's old personnel file. In bright red ink, she wrote, he came to clean floors. He left cleaning souls. Then she closed the folder, and the story went on, not in books, not in films, but in the footsteps of every student who walked those halls, a little taller, a little kinder, and a lot more respectful because of a man who taught them not with words, but with presence. Fairview High never forgot, because legends don't fade. They echo forever, and echo it did, long after Mr. Harrison's passing. On the 20th anniversary of his first day at Fairview High, the school held a full-day tribute. The banners read, 20 years of a legacy, honoring Sergeant Benjamin R. Harrison. Every hallway was lined with student-made posters featuring quotes, artwork, and handwritten stories about how his life had touched theirs, even from students who never met him in person. Some wrote how they'd stopped bullying because of the story. Others said they joined the Marines, ROTC, or even just decided to hold their heads higher, walk with more dignity, and treat others with more grace. That morning, the school invited alumni back for a ceremony. Kyle was now a gunnery sergeant, a man whose jaw had grown even firmer, whose chest held new ribbons, and whose voice had grown deeper with command. He wore his dress blues just as Harrison once had. Maya, now head counselor and advisor to the district's youth leadership board, stood next to him as co-host. The gymnasium was filled beyond capacity. Even the mayor came. Local news stations rolled their cameras, but none of that mattered to Kyle, who stood with his speech in hand, palms surprisingly sweaty. He took the stage and looked out. "I don't want to read a speech today," he began, because Mr. Harrison didn't read from anything. He spoke from who he was. He paced slowly, the way Harrison used to. "I remember the first time I saw him. I laughed. I thought I was better than him, cleaner, stronger. I thought I had everything figured out. I thought the man pushing the mop was beneath me." He paused. "Turns out, I was standing in the presence of greatness, and I didn't even know it." Kyle's voice broke slightly. "I've seen war now. I've stood in places where people scream and cry and bleed and pray. I've lost brothers. I've made decisions I'll never forget. And every time I hesitated, I'd hear him, back straight, eyes forward, do what needs to be done." He looked down at his hands. "These hands," he taught me, "are only useful if they're doing good. Doesn't matter if you're holding a rifle or a mop handle." The crowd sat motionless. And now, every new recruit I train, every young soldier I command, I tell them his story, not just the parts about combat, but the part where he chose to come to a high school, to mop floors, to teach without ever needing a classroom. He stepped away from the mic. "I'm proud to say I was trained by one of the greatest men I've ever known. And he never raised his voice. He didn't need to." Then Maya stepped up. She spoke slowly, each word heavy with memory. "Sergeant Harrison didn't just serve his country. He served this school, this community. He stood for something we don't talk about enough: quiet honor." She looked over at the ROTC students seated in the front row. "And honor doesn't mean medals or stripes. It means showing up, doing the hard thing, standing up for people who can't stand on their own. That's what he taught me. That's why I do what I do." She turned to the photo of Harrison on the stage behind her. "Thank you for saving us, Sergeant, even from ourselves." Tears streaked down more than a few faces in the crowd. The tribute ended with a surprise. A group of former students had petitioned to create a scholarship fund in his name. The Harrison Honor Grant would be awarded annually to a student who demonstrated leadership through service, not popularity. The first recipient, Marcus, the quiet student Harrison once stood up for. Now in college studying social work, when Marcus came up to accept, he didn't say much. Just this: "I wouldn't be alive if not for that man. He saw something in me when I didn't see it in myself." After the ceremony, students and guests were invited to walk down what had been renamed Sergeant's Row, a wing of the school filled with art, testimonials, and an interactive display chronicling Harrison's military career and time at Fairview. One video showed him at a Veterans Day event, giving his last recorded message before retirement. "I didn't come here for thanks. I didn't come here for titles. I came here because this place had forgotten how to respect itself. And I knew maybe if I just kept showing up, maybe someone would notice. Maybe they'd remember how to walk tall." He smiled slightly, and it looks like they did. That night, after the tribute ended and the lights dimmed, a single student stayed behind. A young boy named James, freshman, struggled with stuttering, often ate lunch alone. He stood in front of Harrison's portrait, backpack hanging from one shoulder. "I heard you were a hero," he whispered. The building creaked. No answer, of course, but "I think you're the kind of hero I could be too." Not the yelling kind, the quiet kind. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. He taped it below the frame. It read, "Dear Mr. Harrison, I get made fun of sometimes too. But now I know one day I can still change the world. Thank you for teaching me that, James." Then he left, quietly. The next morning, the janitor found the note and, instead of taking it down, laminated it and pinned it beside the others on the wall of honor. Because every ripple mattered. And every student, whether they knew it or not, walked a little taller each day, not because of assemblies, not because of punishments or lectures, but because a man once showed them through silence, service, and steel-eyed resolve what real strength looked like. And his legacy, it didn't fade, it multiplied in every held door, in every picked-up tray, in every voice that chose kindness instead of cruelty, in every back straightened by memory, and in every whisper that echoed through Fairview's halls, sergeants watching. Forever. Years continued to pass, and Fairview High evolved like any school does, with new teachers, new technology, new faces filling old classrooms. But one thing remained untouched: the legacy of Sergeant Benjamin R. Harrison. By the 30th anniversary of his arrival at Fairview, the town itself had started to feel his imprint. A statue had been commissioned and installed just outside the school gates. It wasn't glamorous, just a life-sized bronze of him in his janitor's uniform, one hand holding a mop, the other resting behind his back, posture ramrod straight, eyes gazing toward the flagpole. At the base of the statue, the inscription read, "Discipline, dignity, duty." He swept our floors and lifted our souls. Every morning, students stopped by the statue. Some touched the plaque for good luck before exams. Others just stood a moment in silence, drawing invisible strength from the presence of a man they never met, but somehow always felt close to. Fairview became known across the state not just for its academics, but for its culture. News outlets started referring to it as the School of Quiet Leadership. Other districts sent administrators to study the campus ethos. They asked, "How did you fix bullying? How did you raise discipline rates? How did you lower suspensions?" Principal Reynolds, who now worked as a consultant for the district, even gave a TED Talk. "We didn't fix it with policies. We fixed it with presence. One man changed everything, not by scolding, but by showing, not by demanding attention, but by earning respect. He didn't lecture students. He showed them what it meant to walk through fire and still mop the ashes with grace." Back on campus, Sergeant Coleman kept Harrison's traditions alive. He assigned cadets to community service projects, not for punishment, but for leadership development. One time, when a student asked why they had to clean graffiti on weekends, Coleman replied, "You think this is about cleaning walls? No, this is about learning to take ownership. This is about becoming someone who leaves places better than they found them, just like Harrison." Among the ROTC students was a new girl, Talia, tough, sharp, and distant. She'd transferred from a big city school after too many run-ins with fights and suspensions. Everyone assumed she'd be trouble. On her first day, she stood arms folded, rolling her eyes as Sergeant Coleman told Harrison's story. But then something in her shifted. The next week, she stayed after class. "Was that all true?" she asked. "That stuff about the janitor being a Marine." Coleman nodded. Every word. Talia looked away, jaw tense. "My brother was in the Army. He died overseas. No one ever talks about him at school." Coleman stepped closer, voice gentle. "Maybe you could help us talk about him, about others like him." Talia's wall cracked. A month later, she volunteered to lead the Veterans Day Assembly. She read names from the community, young men and women lost in war, including her brothers. She stood tall, clear-voiced, and never broke. At the end, she added, "I never met Mr. Harrison, but I think he would have understood my brother. I think he would have understood me. And I think we all need to be a little more like him." She earned a standing ovation. Talia went on to become the first black female ROTC commander in Fairview High's history. On her last day, she visited the statue alone. She stood for a while, then pulled out her journal, tore out a page, and folded it at the base. It read, "I came here broken. I'm leaving whole. Thank you for standing guard, even when we didn't see you. Rest easy, Sergeant." As years became decades, former students came back as parents. They brought their kids to walk the halls. They pointed at the walls, the lockers, the gym. "You see that plaque? That's where he gave his first speech. You see that bench? That's where I sat when I realized I was wrong about him. And the children listened, wide-eyed, slowly understanding that greatness didn't always wear a cape or a title. Some of the kids, when no one was watching, would mimic salutes in front of his statue, not because they were told to, but because somehow they knew it meant something. And once a year, on the day of his passing, the school held what became known as the silence hour. From 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., every student, every teacher, every administrator stopped what they were doing. Phones off, no announcements, just quiet. They walked, they wrote, some cried. Some sat outside the janitor's closet, still labeled sergeant's quarters, and left notes, poems, drawings, and letters. One student wrote, "Dear Sergeant Harrison, the first never met you, but you made it okay to be different. You made me feel safe even when I didn't know why. I want to be strong like you, not loud, just strong. Thank you." When new janitors were hired, they were given a special orientation, a tour of the school, a briefing with staff, and a visit to the statue. Principal Hartley, who had taken over after Reynolds, would always say the same thing. "This man you see here, he's not just a symbol, he's the foundation. If you ever doubt the value of what you do, remember him." And every janitor left that tour with a pin that read, Harrison's line, "Stand tall, mop proud." One of them, Mr. Reed, wore it on his hat every day. Sometimes students would stop him in the hallway just to say, "Hey, thanks for keeping the sergeant's spirit alive." Mr. Reed would smile, mop in hand, "Doing my part, kid," just like he did. And thus, the legacy of a quiet man, a soldier with medals he never flaunted, a janitor who cleaned floors like he was saluting the flag, became immortal not through history books, but through heartbeats. He had entered Fairview with no title, no announcement, no introduction, and he left a legend, a man who taught generations that greatness isn't always loud, and leadership doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it comes in a bucket, a pair of worn boots, and a silence that echoes forever.